Well, thank you, Paul. I think I'm getting my video up right now, and hopefully everyone can hear me. I got the thumbs up. And so, as Paul said, my name is Sean Termolin. I'm a graduate student here at Purdue University working on my master's, and I also work with AgrAbility. And my focus is with older farmers and looking at safety with them on an overview, and then also I have interests with woodlot and wood cutting accidents such as bend down trees. But that's about me. Let's go ahead and jump in. And so I'm going to be talking about fatality and injury risks for senior farmers. So just some background. What generally for working, the age of retirement is 65, around that, but that's not necessarily the case for farmers. You can see that according to in 2012, the average age of farmers was 58.3, and there are a third that are over 65, and 12% that are over 75. So there's a lot of older farmers working. Some of the reasons why that might be the case is there's strong feelings for agriculture. They are really passionate about it. I don't know if you've talked with an older farmer, you may have heard things like, "Oh, I'm going to be on my tractor, till the day I die." And so farmers define their health as ability to work. They don't want to be, stuck inside or anything like that. And then, there's a study here that shows that a little over a quarter said they never intended to retire. And then also financial issues might be a case where, I don't know, you may have heard the saying where farmers are land rich but cash poor. They have a lot of assets, land, equipment that are worth a lot of money, but not a lot of liquid funds. And so, then here there was a study where only 15% said that they'd be willing to sell some of these assets for retirement. And then Social Security is a way to supplement their income, but depending on their work experience and stuff, that doesn't necessarily account for a large part of their income. And so then, with more background, just over general aging. So we all know that there's changes to the body with aging. It is not chronological, though, which means that someone who is affected, say mobility, they have knee issues 60. That doesn't mean that everyone's affected when they're 60. It could be that someone's affected earlier or later in their 80s. So it really depends on the individual. But in general, mobility. Excuse me, I'm going to cough, and so I apologize for that. And so with mobility, there's compared to younger adults, older adults move slower, and then also could have issues, like joint pains, flexibility, just general muscle strength, and so here's a study that's found that older farmers with mobility issues were twice as likely to get injured. And then other like sensories, like hearing and stuff, are also affected. Hearing is a commonly affected by aging. It's harder to hear when you factor in farming, which involves a lot of loud equipment, tractors, chainsaws, whatever it is, and that can damage your hearing over time, especially if you don't wear ear protection. And then there's some studies that found that hearing loss will actually increase the risk of getting injured while farming. And then, so vision, another sensory. It's going to sound like a broken record here, but with age, there's increase with, so there's a decrease in vision, increase in like the probability of blindness. There's also some age-related vision diseases like glaucoma, macular degeneration, which can glaucoma would be affecting the peripheral of your vision, while macular degeneration would be the center. And also just the amount of light that your retina is able to capture and receive is reduced. Yeah, you can see here that 2/3 was lost, the amount of light captured by retina in a 60-year-old versus a 20-year-old. And then mental reaction time, which is an important one. You have slow reflexes reaction time, which is important with farming. There's a lot of fast-moving equipment. If you're cutting down a tree, it's trying to gauge where it is and react to it in fast time, or if something comes in front of you, you're driving on the road, all that stuff can cause issues. And so, looking at the risk of agriculture, just in general, farming is a dangerous profession. Here I have data from Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries and National Safety Council. And so, looking at the Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries, in 2016, the fatal work injury rate, which is per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers. So this is for all workers, it was 3.6. When you compared that to farmers, ranchers, and other agriculture managers, it was 23.1. And if you look at the image on the right, yeah, you can see that farmers also had the second highest number of fatal work injuries out of the ones included. And the National Safety Council data also said a similar thing, where all workers, the fatal work injury rate was 3. For farmers, is 22.6. So it's a huge difference between the two. And then I just have at the bottom here where it's important when you're looking at this data. Like people say, like, oh, agriculture is a dangerous profession. Well, just realize that sometimes fishing and forestry and other agricultural professions are included into that. So if you are looking for numbers, it may not just be for farming. All right, so there's just a lot of stuff thrown at you, but why is it important to AgrAbility? Well, the vision of AgrAbility, as you can see here, is to enhance quality of life for farmers, ranchers, and other agricultural workers with disabilities. And under that scope is aging. And when you look at the demographics for clients during 2016-2017, a large amount, 41.8% of clients were 60 years or older. So there's a large population that we're working with that are, I guess, fall under the older farmer category. So a little bit of what I did I have some data coming up, and I'll try not to bore everyone. But so I conducted a literature review. Then I just wanted to point out that AgrAbility has some plowshares. There's like one specifically for aging, and then there's also like potential health and safety risks for farming with a disability. They're great resources if you're looking for that. And then as I did my literature review, I found that there's not a lot on woodlot accidents in the literature, where there are for like professional loggers, but for say a farmer who's cutting down fence rows or something, there's not a lot of data, literature on that. And so what I did was I went ahead and took a 20-year period from 1997 to 2016 and looked at the fatalities of farmers who are 60 years or older. And so what I did with that is I wanted to figure out kind of the, why did the fatalities occur? Like, what were the most common injury types? How it may have contributed, and then what can we do about it now that we know that it's an issue. And so the data that I was using comes from the Purdue Farm Fatality Summaries. And so the Purdue Agriculture Safety and Health Program has been doing this for a long time. They have going back to the 1960s for farm fatality data. And these cases are collected from a wide variety of sources, published news reports, internet searches, interviews with public extension staff. It's not comprehensive because there is no required reporting of fatalities, farm fatalities, because OSHA only requires farms with 11 or more workers be reported. And so you have smaller farms with 10 or less, then they're not required to report as farm fatalities. And then also, I just looked at fatalities because injuries non-fatal are often not reported. If either it's not recorded at the hospital or they may not even go get medical help, and so it's just hard to collect all that. And so then this data is used to collect or determine trends over time. Like for example, if you look, was it like 1950s and back, the most common cause of fatalities were livestock related, but as tractors got more common and popular, then tractors took that #1 spot as the most common fatality type. And then also, some of the recent summaries have noted that there are an increase in the number of older farmer fatalities. Since 2012, over half the cases, or about half the cases, were farmers 60 years and older. So here's what I found. So this is for the 20-year period for farmers 60 years and older, and there were a total of 206 fatality cases. Almost all of them were male, with 198 males versus 8 females, and most of the 8 females were roadway incidents. So if a tractor and car got into an accident, or vice versa. And then the average age was 52.6 years old. So that's, if for most industries, the common age of retirement is about 65. That's already, 7 to 8 years above that. And then, as you can see in the image, that tractors are by far the most common cause of fatalities, with about 90-something cases, and the second highest machinery related was just shy of 40. So there's about a 50 case difference between the two. Tractor related accounted for almost 50% of all the fatality cases reported in that 20-year time. And then the average age for those were, for a tractor, was 22.56, so about the same as for the average age of all cases. But yeah, you can see that tractor is the most common, and then machinery is second highest. And then, the roadway, which would be, like I said, if a tractor and a car got into an accident, or a tractor and a train, or farm trucks and stuff like that. And then woodlot was also fourth highest, which was kind of surprising, since it's, all these other cases there's literature on, talking about, but woodlot is commonly not addressed. So here it's just comparing the older farmers versus all ages. And so the orange in the image is all ages since 1970s. You can see that the trend line is decreasing. So there's a decreasing trend in the frequency of fatalities for all ages. But when you just look at the 20-year period of older farmers, which is the green, that it is increasing, which supports what was found in the Purdue farm fatality summaries, where over half the cases in the last 6 years were 60 years and older. All right, so there's the nitty-gritty, but what do we do with it now that we know that these are the issues? Well, there's looking at how to address how to educate the public um, and clients. And so you need to figure out a way to take this data and I don't know, say it in the right way for the clients to hear it and understand it. If you just go ahead and start spouting numbers, oh, there's 206 fatality cases, blah, 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 that may not be the best approach, but trying to make sure that they understand different safety risks for different agricultural practices. And, just talking with the client, just sitting down, you know, don't be standing up with a PowerPoint and showing graphs and charts and stuff. Just get to know them, talk with them, and go from it that way. And I'll discuss that a little bit more later. But and so next what I'd like to do is look into the two groups of tractors, since they're almost about 50% of the cases reported in that time. They're the largest agent of the death, important to discuss. But then also wanted to talk about woodlots, and you can see in the image a large amount of data, but in the last 9 years, there's been an increase where it was almost not reported at all in the previous, about 10 years or so. And then the lack of literature, as I've said several times. So going into tractor-related incidents, so I had the big overview of tractors were the most common machinery. Now this is kind of break down into tractors. What were the most common fatality risks? And so you can see that overturns, or where like the like a rollover, were most common by far. Almost 25% of all the senior farmer fatalities were overturns. So then runovers were the second highest, with about, 15, 16. And so now we'll go ahead and jump into a little bit of information on, I guess, what may affect overturns and some different solutions for that. And we'll go ahead and do that for several of the tractor-related types. And so with overturns, it's not necessarily affects overturns in causing them, but this is an important way of, if it does happen, protecting the driver of the tractor, which is the ROPS, the rollover protection structure. As you can see in the image in the top right, that's a rollover protection structure, which is pretty much just a support that if the tractor does turn over, and if you're buckled in, then you will have a safe area. The tractor won't actually be crushing you as it turns over. And so the rollover protection structures, the ROPS, they became standard in 1986, but that doesn't account for older tractors, and we'll talk about that in the solutions part. And so then with overturns, it's the throwing the weight off into the tractor. And so some of the things that you have, like high center of gravity, rear-wheel drive, if you attach equipment in the wrong, or towing in the wrong place, or driving in uneven ground, all of that can offset the weight of the tractor and contribute to overturns. So the most frequent the types of overturns are side, going either right to left or to the rear overturns. And then, as I was saying with the rollover protection structure, how they became standard in 1986. Well, older farmers tend to have older equipment. If it works, why get rid of it? Why spend tens of thousands or more dollars to get a new tractor? So some solutions: install ROPS protection, like a ROPS. That'll help prevent injuries in the case of an overturn. In 2011, there's only 59% of tractors had ROPS. The issue with that is it can be expensive. It can be up to like $5,000, and so that's where communicating with the clients and saying, well, okay, well, it may be expensive, but maybe I don't know, is it worth $5,000, or is it worth the risks of potentially getting injured if you don't spend that? And then also just realizing that some of these older tractors, they aren't the best for production use, and go ahead and save them for parades or showing off, and use some newer equipment which may be safer. So with the runovers, there's kind of two types: either the operators run over or bystanders. And so some of the things that can contribute to that would be starting the tractor from the ground, bypass starting. That involves jumping it from the ground, and generally you're in front of the tractor, and if a gear slips or accidentally it was in gear, then it could move forward and roll over the operator. And then if failed to put the parking brake on, get off the tractor, just think I'm going to get off for a few seconds or whatever, and they could roll. And then also getting on and off a moving tractor. Because all these things are just, you're trying to save time. If rain's coming maybe, and you're trying to get the last field harvested, you're trying to move fast, you may think, oh, I can just kind of cut some of these corners, it's not a big deal. But maybe spending a few more seconds on that just to be safe, so then you don't get injured and have bigger issues down the road. And so then for the bystanders, and that'd be where if you have like an extra rider on the tractor, sitting on, like a part where it can fall off, get underneath the wheels, or if have some visibility issues, if you have like a front loader filled up, or a fork with a bale on it, something like that, where you can't see, or even just behind you. If maybe I have some mobility issues of like being able to look over your shoulder or turn around. So some solutions to that is, go ahead and make sure, always sit on the seat when you're starting it. Just go ahead and get up and down. Have the parking brake engaged if you're getting off the tractor while it's running. Go ahead and make sure the tractor's stopped before you get on off of it. And I don't have riders, especially young kids. I know that it's that it's harvest season, and it's just kind of the culture where go ahead and have neighborhood kids come in. I think I did that when I was younger. Go ahead and ride in combine or tractors or something like that, and maybe that's not the best idea. And then installing cameras. And so say it's a scenario where you're driving a tractor and the operator can't look over their shoulders very easily. You can have a backup camera where it'll be on the screen in front of you, and you'll be able to see if there's someone behind you, so you don't accidentally run someone over. And then falls. This one's pretty straightforward. It's just agriculture, farming and agriculture can be pretty dirty. Out in the field, get covered in mud, grease, wet steps, everything else. So it's easy to slip on those. Or if it's just stuff in the way, go ahead and have your lunch pail down in the cab, and there's only so much room in there, or move it around, didn't notice it, could go ahead and trip and fall on the tractor. And so some solutions to that is footwear. Make sure you have footwear that has good grips. You can have get some they're like not soles, but like they go on the bottom of your shoes to help with grip. And then just maintain a clean work area. Make sure that you don't have stuff in your path, moving around. And so moving along into the woodlot incidents. So you can see here that felling trees was the most common, but it's fairly, it's pretty much even with the, falling trees, cutting down trees with being struck by a limb or log. And then you can see that, something to pay attention to, there's no chainsaw-related incidents reported. And so those would probably be more injury or maybe a fatality that happened later that wasn't reported as a farm fatality. And so then, literature also supported that there were little to no chainsaw-related fatalities when they looked at their data. So moving into it, so with cutting down trees, it can be difficult, even if you're experienced. There's a lot of factors that play into where the tree may be going. Wind, lean of the tree, weak spots, maybe there's beetle damage or, just fungal, just rotting because it's old and it's on the inside and you can't see it. And so it's, important to have some knowledge of looking at, okay, well, this tree, most of the weight's leaning to the right, so it's going to fall that way more than likely, or, whatever the case may be. Then lack of experience cutting down trees. Anyone can go to a hardware store and pick up a chainsaw really easily. Just because you can buy it doesn't mean you necessarily should be using it. There's some programs and training workshops that you can enroll in to teach you the basics, make sure you're safe, which I'll get to in just a second here. And then also no safety gear. If you look online at some people who are cutting, using chainsaws, it's scary. Just what they're wearing, shorts, flip flops, everything. And so having safety gear, appropriate safety gear, is important. And so some of the solutions. So as I said, there are chainsaw safety and felling courses. They're often offered by universities, through extension programs, or by other organizations. And so, I attended one this past year, last spring, and it was really good. Where it was multiple day where they went ahead and went through all the basics of, here's a chainsaw, and this is what this does, and how to maintain it, to actually getting experience of cutting down a tree with a professional instructor. And so, that can be a great way of getting some experience in a safe environment, and also making sure you have appropriate safety gear. Head protection, which is more than just like a hard hat, but in the previous slide, there were I believe 7 incidents where there were fatalities from falling limbs and logs, and so having a hard hat can be an important way to protect yourself. But then also having eye gear, eye protection, and hearing protection, because there's a lot of sawdust and chips going around, can get in your eyes, and then the chainsaw's loud and can affect your hearing, which can also, if you have hearing damage, can lead to being more susceptible to injuries. And so chainsaw chaps, even though chainsaws weren't chainsaw-related incidents weren't reported as fatalities, they still happen. And having chainsaw chaps can make a big difference. If you don't know what chainsaw chaps are, they're just like pants, or you can have full body ones that have Kevlar strands in them, and if the chainsaw hits it, the strands are designed to be pulled out, and they bind the chainsaw and stop it from moving, and kill it. So then, hopefully, you won't be cut. And then having protective footwear, as I said before, there's you know, a lot of horror stories online of just people wearing just absurd stuff and having proper footwear. I believe OSHA for loggers requires have sturdy boots with at least ankle support, so coming to above your ankles, and then non-slip gloves. Then also non-slip, and you can get gloves to help with the vibration, because as the chains will have vibrations, and that can cause pain and discomfort over long time with use. And then also working in pairs. It's and this is something that's important for just about everything you do. It's always great to work in pairs if you can. If you're out, say you're cutting down trees or shrubs or something, and you get injured, whatever it may be, cut yourself, get hit, whatever. Being in pair means you have someone who can help you. You can maybe go for help, all that, versus being stuck out alone. And I'll have a case study at the end, which kind of talks about how that may have been helpful. I guess spoiler alert for that. But then also having a communication device, cell phone, walkie-talkie, radio, something where if you do need help, you can go ahead and contact someone. All right, so that there's kind of what the issues are, how there might be some solutions to it, but how do you go ahead and take all that and get it connected with the clients? And so you have to also remember that, as I said earlier, farmers have strong feelings about agriculture and farming. And if you come in and say, oh, well, I don't think that you can, go cut down trees or something, and just say it in a very just strong way like that, then they may shut off and just be like, oh, no, I'm not going to stop. And so there may be better ways to approach the subject. And also, as I said before, just listing off numbers and saying, oh, well, this is a big issue, may not be the best, but go ahead and just talk with the client, have a connection, and just say, hey, I'm worried about you. Do you take a cell phone out with you when you cut down trees, or go check on livestock or something like that, and just kind of approach it more as in a friendly way than well, you can't do that. And then also talking with friends and family, which can lead to maybe having interventions for them, or as AgrAbility staff, helping mediate compromises, understanding that there's some farmers who say they want to die in their tractor, and okay, that's but maybe we can go ahead and install a rollover protection structure, and make some sort of compromise, whatever it may be. Then also having safety material that is non-traditional. There's in this study here, they found that using methods such as having like a picture of a young kid telling their granddad to buckle up was more effective than some of their just generic, buckle up for safety. Having that emotional connection of, I want to see my grandfather grow up, was effective. And so, all right. And then I wanted to go ahead and, as I'm finishing up, look at a case study. And I'll go ahead and, go ahead and walk through the case study, and then at the end can think about, well, what are some of the things that could have been done that may have helped prevent the fatality? So this is a real-life example. It's in the Michigan FACE reports. It's investigation 03MI 134 if you're interested. But they're all free online through the NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And so anyways, up in Michigan, there's a 78-year-old farmer, and he had a small maple syrup production. he had some hills with trees, and so he was it was in the fall. He was getting firewood prepared for maple syrup production season in the spring or early spring. And so he was going through his hilly property in the International Farmall Cub tractor. Had no ROP structure installed, an older tractor, and he went down his went a hill in this area, and had unhooked his trailer and had his chainsaw out, and then unsure of exactly what happened there, but there was some sort of either medical emergency or some reason for him to get back home, get help, and he was alone out there and had no communication device like a cell phone. And so he went ahead and left his equipment other than his tractor down at the bottom of the hill, and he decided that even though he came a different direction, the shorter way was going to be going up a hill towards his house. And so he pretty much just headed straight up the hill for it, for the house. And as he was on the hill, he turned to align with the house. And at that point, his rear tires started to slip, and it resulted in a side overturn as it went down the hill. You can see that this picture, sorry, that's not very good quality. That's what they had, but this is where the tractor landed and stopped. And he wasn't found until later in the day. He didn't show up for lunch, and his wife got worried, and so they started looking for him, and that's when he was found there and declared dead on the scene by emergency response personnel. So what are some things that could have been done there? Well, he didn't have a cell phone, and so if he was having a medical emergency, maybe he could have contacted someone to come out there. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe could have affected his judgment, movement, if it was a medical emergency, or just get someone out there for help. Avoiding steep slopes, he came down a different direction. That was one of the common kind of roadways in his property, and he cut off of that and went a new way, and where he was going up steep slopes. And then also, which I guess kind of is similar to the communication device, but working with someone else out there, having a pair, because having a partner where you can also, in addition to just having help if you do get injured or go get someone, you can also talk about stuff. Maybe you have a challenging case of, oh, well, I want to get over there, but there's steep slopes. How do I get around it in tractor? Or, oh, I want to cut down this tree, but I don't know if my experience level, like, I don't know if I can handle it. And so you can talk with someone else, and maybe throw in ideas, or maybe just get to the conclusion that, all right, I shouldn't be doing this. Let's go ahead and approach it from another direction. And so, in conclusion, farming is a dangerous profession. And then older farmers are at high risk for injuries and fatalities with farming. AgrAbility works with a large population of older farmers, and it's a great way to talk with farmers about safety. Then tractors are by far the most common agent of death. And then also the number of woodlot incidents are increasing. And then looking at how education, improved safety awareness practice can help reduce injuries and fatalities. But you can have all that, but you need to make sure it's in given in a way that will actually be received by the clients who you're trying to help. And then, as I said, AgrAbility staff are important and playing a role to help prevent injuries. And then I guess that leads to questions.
We do have one question. I'll just ask verbally, and Sean, you can respond.
Okay.
Do you know what percentage of farmers are over the age of 60?
Off the top of my head, unfortunately, I do not. Um, it was, I believe, if we go back up a bit, what was it? It said 1/3, so it's not a percentage, but it's an idea. Oh, it was 65. Sorry. So yeah, that's a good question. Uh, I'd have to look that up. I don't want to give any wrong numbers. But if you do go to the just USDA census, you should be able to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Let's see what we can do here. All right, let me see if I can share a couple other questions here. This is a comment from Deb Chester, and she suggests looking at the BLS website to find some additional data in terms of both fatalities and non-fatal injuries. So that may be something that is useful to not only us here at Purdue, but other state projects that are interested in that.
And actually, thank you for mentioning that, Deb, because the Purdue Agriculture Safety and Health Program, their farm fatality summaries are checked with the BLS, where BLS works with us to look at the data and kind of compare and see where some cases, like just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and there are no outliers. And so, yeah.
Another question in terms of whether you think some of these fatalities may be to hobby farmers who may be actually starting farming late in life. Any ideas on that?
And so I know I have heard stories about maybe someone in a richer profession, lawyer, doctor, where they retire and just say, "Oh, all right, we can go ahead and buy some property, buy some tractors, equipment, and go out." And as for actual numbers, I don't know. I know if you look at the census data, there is an increase in small farms. I don't know if that's just older farmers, or how much is older farmers versus younger farmers. But I do agree. I do think that there's at least some older farmers who are, I guess, new hobby farmers that are people who could benefit from having some experience and increase in safety practices with farming.
Another question about existing disabilities, how that might affect to contributing to secondary injuries. Do you have any thoughts on that?
And so, in my actual review literature, I have found that having some disabilities like arthritis, also some medication usages, lead to injuries. And as for secondary injuries, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look at my data and my literature to see for that. But yeah, it's found that all these are can increase your risk of receiving injuries.
One question that came in, do you have any tips on how to speak to other agency professionals about farm culture in a way to help them understand how vital continuing to farm is for a farmer, even when he or she works with a disability?
Well, that's a good question. I can't say I've actually thought of that. That I need to address that. So thank you for bringing that up. I guess it depends on the agency. If it might be where you're talking about some of this data, and you know, half half of farmers, since 2012 in Indiana, were that fatalities were 60 years and older, um, and I guess also it's a hard one to answer and for people to understand because I don't know, people just think, oh, well, we need to go ahead and keep people alive and safe, and that's very important. But also, you have to, I don't know, it's the juggling of, if a farmer says, well, I want to die farming, like, like how, like you can't change their mind on that, and unless you, I don't know, just take away their tractors or something, it's, it's not going to necessarily stop. And so I guess that's a hard one to answer, hard one for some people to understand if they aren't in their personal shoes. So I guess maybe addressing it that way, just try to think of, well, maybe this farmer who's lived on his land for I don't know, it's a third generation farmer or something, just how attached they are and the emotional connection they have. That might be a way, but that's a hard question to answer. But hopefully that's gives some ideas. If you have any good ones, feel free to share with me.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have right now.